Hey, how's it going guys? My name's Daniel, aka HashLips, and welcome to my channel where today I'm going to release the alpha version of the new Art Creator Studio. First things first, why am I releasing the alpha version? Well, looking at the feedback from you guys, it's clear that you want to start trying it out. And even though it's not ready for production yet, meaning that I'm not 100% confident in the data that it exports, I know that you can at least play around with it and generate some data. That being said, the intent of this release is for user feedback. I want you to let me know what you like, what you don't like, while you try it out. And you can give me that feedback right here on YouTube in the comment section. So I just want to make it clear that in no way am I guaranteeing that the data is going to be accurate. You can verify it yourself, but it's not meant to use in production. By that I mean actually exporting NFTs and uploading them to the blockchain, even though the app can fully do that at this stage. If you want to go ahead and verify it yourself, by all means go and do so. For now, we're just going to have some fun, and this is an opportunity for you to just play around with layers and see how your artworks combined into one. Now that that's out of the way, let's see what will give you the best result. I would recommend constructing a folder with all your layers in it. I've got this data folder. I've got a background folder, a body, a clothing, face, props, and x-rays. In each of these folders, I've got my options. Here I've got a blue background, and I've got a navy blue and an orange. If I go to my bodies, here I can see I've got the bodies as so. And you can just name them normally. Something to keep in mind is once you've named your files and your layers, and you import this in the Art Engine, do not rename them on your system. Rather, rename them on the Art Engine itself. And I'll show you how to do that as well. When it comes to edge cases, for example, in the props folder, I've got some cool pink cat ears, some glasses, and a hat. But I also have a backpack folder inside of the props. In the backpack is here, but it's split into two layers. So if you need an edge case like that, you just simply create that folder inside of your desired trait folder. For in my example, this backpack over here. Now that you have all your layers, we are ready to move to the Art Engine. So let's get going. And here it is. So if you want to go to the studio, you can go to https://studio.deveffort.io. You go there, you will be prompted with this pop-up. Please read the terms and conditions, and if you're happy with that, then you can continue. The second thing that I want you to make sure that you are using is a Chrome browser. Next, you need to have MetaMask installed and make sure that you are on the Polygon main network. This is so that I can verify things on the Polygon network via contracts. Okay, so the first step is for us to connect. I'm going to connect, confirm, and now I'm just going to accept the terms and conditions. Like I said, read through them. And here we are. We are in the Art Engine. Really cool. And now I'm going to take you through the interface so that you feel comfortable when you start building your collection. The Art Creator Studio is made up of different sections. On the left-hand side, we've got the navigation bar. This will determine which phase you are in or what you're busy doing. For example, here we've got the studio that you can see over here. And on this button, we go to the exporter. Now, if you're not sure what some of the buttons do, you can always hover over them and they'll tell you. For example, if I don't know what this is, you can just hover over it. Then on the navigation bar, we can also see the version. We can save the current app state as it is, or we can even load the config. We'll get to that later on. We also get a theme switch for if you prefer a more lighter version of the app. Okay, so that's all about the navigation bar. The most important part is the studio and the exporter. We're going to start in the studio. And the studio itself has a few different panels that we need to get used to. So in the studio, we've got an Explorers panel. This panel is made for your folder structures. It will be constructed by itself, or you can custom construct it as well. However, you would rarely touch this panel after you have imported data. Then we've got a preview panel. This is where we can see some of the results. We have a configuration panel made for configuring anything you select. And then we have groups and compositions. Most of the time, you'll spend your time configuring the groups and also tweaking some of the items configurations. So the first thing that you will do is actually upload your media files. Here at the top on the Explorer, there's a media library. You can select it, and then you can either click on this button over here or on this button over here where you get to upload or sync media files. Once you do so, we can now just go ahead and select that folder. This is important to select the top level folder and not the nested ones. So once you've done that, you should see that it's going to ask you for access, and it imports all of those files in here. And simultaneously, in the Explorer, it goes ahead and builds out that folder structure that you had. At this stage, if you have constructed your folder structure from the get-go in the correct way, and you're happy with all the namings, and you look at the folders over here and the nesting of the edge cases, you can go to the next step. However, there is this opportunity where from the media library side, you can even rename an item. Just do not rename it on your system because we need reference to that. For example, if I'm not happy with the banana face's name, maybe I can say yellow banana face. The same goes for the Explorer. We can rename the trait. So this is our background trait, our body trait. And as you select them, you can see that you get to configure things on the right-hand side. So just remember that when you select something, you can probably configure it here on the right-hand side. Now, like I said, if everything is correct how you have made it, then you can go to the next step. If not, you can do small tweaks. For example, you can remove maybe this navy blue if you do not like it to be a part of your backgrounds. You can select it again, maybe pull it in there. You can play around, build up your folder structure over here as well. I really recommend getting it rather correct from the beginning instead of playing around here. And the reason for that is if you have to give this to a friend, yes, you have the saved configuration, but it's just so much more easier when you've done it on the folder system level first. Now, in the media library, what you can also do is search for files. So I can search for my backpack or a blue layer. You can also use this button over here to switch to a multi-select. Let's say I wanted to construct a new trait. On my Explorer, I can create a new folder. Maybe I just say this is bones. I don't know why, but this could be bones, right? And we want to select all these bones and we want to pull this in here. So now we have got a new trait that we could use for these bones. However, I'm going to remove this because I'm happy with my x-rays here at the bottom. Now, another thing is that you can see that you can delete files over here from the source of truth. And if you do so, it's going to delete it actually in the folders as well. Now, I would be careful deleting files just willy-nilly, seeing that you will have to resync and re-upload your folders and files. The second thing that you can do as well is if we go into the Explorer, we can see that this old face is actually a edge case. You can see this by the pattern on the folder itself. Our famous backpack is a edge case as well. Now I can undo this edge case over here by clicking on this button. And what this will do, it will actually bring the backpack as a trait on the top level. So you can see there's background, there's my backpack. So this is something you can try as well, but I need it to be a part of my props. So if I can just get it back into my props, there we go. That's where I would like it to be. You also get a nice view over here on the config section of what's in this folder. Now, I would highly recommend once you are happy with this all, that you go and save your configuration file. So you basically go here on the navigation and click on save. This will save a .acs file. And this file you can save as many times as you like. when you feel like you've made progress. And the reason for this is if I now just refresh this app and I get to this stage and I click on confirm, I should see that there's nothing here. But if I have this saved file and I go and import this, I see that it imports all my folders. But if I go to the media library, all these are empty. It means it's missing its references, but that's fine. You can simply go to this button over here, which is either upload or sync. And you click on that and you just sync that exact same folder. This way, all your data gets added back and you can verify that it's synced successfully. Okay, so this is how to get your data back, especially useful for when you already have groups and you have a big collection that you have already tweaked for a few days. So that is helpful. Apart from renaming your files and your traits, you can also select different colors. This is helpful for if you really have a specific color that you have in mind. It's just for the editor so that you can get used to where your files are, and that's a nice option. Now, the last button here is you can delete everything. And if you do so, it's just going to wipe out it all. And we don't want to do that right now, but that's an option that you can do. You can see how many files you have to verify if you have successfully imported it all, and it shows you how many you have selected. At this stage, I feel like very confident that everything is good. But our collection itself doesn't have a good name. So for example, if I click on this section over here, I get to the collection config. Here's many different configurations, which I've shown in previous videos, but I'm quickly going to go over it as well. Here I can maybe say this is my sketchy ape collection, and for the symbol I can do SABC like we used to. Now that I have configured my collection, I feel like we're ready to go. By the way, if you delete this, you're going to delete all your folders. At this stage, you can close the media library, and now we're ready to create a group from all of these folders. You can create as many groups as you like. So I'm going to click on this plus icon on the group section. Once I do so, you can see that all these folders and options have been pulled into this bottom section. I can do it again and it would create another group. Let me delete this group and just work with one. Currently, we cannot see the result, and if we want to do so, we need to click on the group's name. This is very important. Every time you've made updates, you click on the group's name so it can refresh those configs and make sure to display something here on the preview. The preview has a few different buttons, but the most important one is the one here at the top right. You can go ahead and click on refresh and it should show you examples of your layers and the order that you've placed them in. You can also go ahead and just realign everything by clicking on this icon, but it does not have an effect unless we have clicked on this button here at the bottom. So if we click here, it will be a 3D view. At this stage, we can just take the mouse and hover around and see our creation in 3D space by using the mouse wheel, clicking and dragging. This button will expand the layers, and then we get this nice slider which can determine the distance. So as we can see, our layers are really not in the right order at this stage, but I just want to show you how you can get to this view. Now if we click on this button, it will just realign it, and if we exit 3D view, we are back to normal. But let's stay in 3D view just for this section so we can see how we are realigning our layers. To reorder the trait, it's pretty straightforward. You select a trait and you just drag it and drop it. Now, the layers that are first is the highest on the list, and each one has a Z index. Over here you can see the background has 100, props has 200, and so on. We would like the background to be the first, and that is correct. Next would be the body. Then we would do the face as well as the clothing, and the props will go here. And then last we have the X-ray layer. Now you don't see any updates yet, and that means that you need to click on the group itself again. And now we can see that the order is much better and in the correct place. Now that we are happy, we can exit 3D space. And now if we just refresh while we are on the group, we can see that we are getting some truly good results. While you have the group selected, you can set things like its name. So we can say apes with maybe X-rays, right? And this is just for the editor and for you to know what groups you are constructing. Next, we have how many generations of this specific group we're going to have. Well, I'm only going to make 10, so I can do this in the tutorial. You can choose an amount. Now, I would highly recommend if you play around with this tool, at first, do not go ahead and generate a 10,000 collection. It's going to take very long. I am fairly confident that you would have a much easier experience generating smaller collections at first to play around before you go ahead and generate big ones. Just because I'm not 100% certain that it can take that load. Although I have tested it, but each collection is different. Next, we get to set the size. So I would recommend setting the size, width and height to the same width and heights that you have for your images. In my case, I'm going to make this 2000 by 2000. And now I know that this group would render at this size, this many of them would be generated, and this is my group's name. Now, for most cases, this would be perfect to have one group for a collection. However, I want to create another group and change it up. I just want to have this group to be apes. And I do not want X-rays, so I'm going to remove by clicking on this dustbin on the X-rays. I am still going to say that my body needs to be there, and then my face, and I'm going to have no props and maybe no clothing. So these are kind of naked apes. However, I can now click on that and see that in this group I only have 3 layers, and this one I've got a lot more. So once I have that group selected, I can see how that one would look. I'm also going to change the amount, maybe to 5, and I also want it to be 2000 by 2000. All right, so now currently our collection has apes with X-rays, and we also have apes that we're going to generate. Now I've got my 2 groups ready, and at this point I would highly recommend just saving the file. Again, this will help us if we lose our data or we come back to the app and we refresh it. As long as we have that source data folder, we should be able to retrieve everything and continue our workflow. Now, still on the Groups panel, you have the option to click on this button, which would change the view of how the rarities are displayed. You can also expand it and have the whole view this rarity section, although it might not be needed for most cases. This is for very big collections. All right, so now that we have this, if you have the group selected, you would see that there's this shuffle trait option. What this will do is it will shuffle the rarities, the probabilities in each of these options. So if I click it, I can see that I get a distributed rarity for all of these items. So you can play around until you're happy with a certain rarity, making sure that there's some variation in it. I can do the same for this one here at the bottom as well. Now keep in mind, this is determined by how many you're going to generate. So if you change the amount, you can either manually set that or reshuffle it. Now that we have a basis for the probability, there might be instances where you see, for example, in the X-ray over here, that I can click on this puzzle trait and I can see that it is quite big and most probably going to be the most common trait in my collection. I can bring that probability down to 2, and that makes it a bit more even. Remember, it doesn't have to be full to the end. Then what I can do is I can configure some of the props that I had, especially the edge cases. For these edge cases, the old face and the zap face, they won't matter because they can collectively render on this layer confidently alongside with their counterparts where the chest and the face is in the same layer. But if we look at the props, we can see that here at the very end, there's the backpack and it has no probability. So I'm going to give it a 5 to make it a bit bigger. And then I can see I can set a few configs on it. I cannot change the name because that is set at the source of truth level. However, I can set the Z order of this by clicking on the relative Z order. If I do so, I see that there's this dot that appears. It will happen to any of these that you change configs in. So, if I do this, it means that this specific backpack would render on the Z order here on the global Z index that you see on the left-hand side. So if I set the global to 700, it means that this backpack and specifically would render above the X-ray because that's at 600. And I can try this out. So if I click on the group again and I go and try and get a backpack, you can see every time I get one, it's on the utmost top layer. Now, I'm going to click on it again and rather make it relative, but I'm going to click on the inside files itself, the edge case files. And I'm going to say for this backpack, I'm going to put a relative, but I'm going to make this 150 because that would place it behind the body and above the background. The same goes for the straps, but this time the straps needs to be at the most top level 700. So the backpack is relative, it is going to render in its space, but it's going to split these layers and render them at different sections in our collection. So now if I click on the group and I refresh, I can see that the straps is over the X-rays at the top level, but the backpack is behind the body. And that is pretty cool. And this is how you can kind of determine where things need to render, even though they are on a specific layer. You can still position them somewhere else. Some of the other things that you can set on your options are also if it should have metadata or not. If this trait is selected, should it have that metadata? You can switch it on or off. You can also do that on a trait level, just to remove that trait completely from metadata, even though it will still be chosen. The same goes if you want a null trait, you can maybe go ahead and put a null. So on this X-ray, we have the X-ray none, which is just an empty trait. We can go ahead and do so and just put the metadata off so that if it doesn't have an X-ray, it would not include that in metadata, which I feel is a better way instead of having this trait that says none. However, that's how you can configure it here. Now, optionally, there are some edge case rules that you can set. For example, you can click on this backpack and go to the rules section. When you go here, you see that we have this tab that says only compatible with options. Now you can select all, that it's compatible with everything, and that shouldn't change any behavior, but you do see a star appears. The star signifies that you have some rules. Now I want to clear all and just make sure that this backpack only fits with Santa. So I can go and say, well, if you have the clothing over here, Santa, you should only ever render with Santa, right? And I can click on my group again. And if I now go and refresh, I will only ever see that backpack render when there's a Santa present, but only if the backpack was chosen. So to make this kind of forcefully happen, I'm going to increase the probability of the Santa and the backpack just so we can accidentally get one right. So let's see. So there we go. It's fitting with the Santa. And you'll see that it doesn't go with any other trait but the Santa if it's chosen. It's not guaranteed that it's going to be there, but it says if the backpack is chosen, only do that with the Santa outfit. Now I have to say that the rules are there, but it is highly experimental. This doesn't guarantee that the traits are going to be there, but you can pick it up in the analysis once we generate to see if it's there. And if it's not, then I would recommend to put that rule off and rather base your collection on edge cases and positioning. All right, so let's now go to the next step. I feel fairly confident in our groups and our setup. So next thing is to always save your file. Then we can go ahead and go to the exporter section. Now the exporter also has a few panels that you need to get used to. You have your collection overview, which contains your collection itself. So if you click here, you get the same configs that you were in the studio. But here we are going to focus on generate and export. You also see your groups that you have. So I can see that I've got my apes with x-rays and I've got my apes. And this one's going to render 10 and this one's going to render 5. And collectively in my collection, I've got 2 groups and it's going to be a total generations of 15. So this will give you a good idea of your collection size and how it's going to export. Now, this is the point where you have to decide if you want to go ahead with this. As I said, I give no guarantees at this point as it's MVP. However, you can play around with it. And if you do, there is a tiny fee to this because I want to make it sustainable as well, pay for service as the app is running. So therefore, in the next step, you do need an access pass to generate. But as you can see, you can use the app freely and construct your project and play around with it. So you don't need to do this section. However, to generate, we have this generation tab. Here we also have a generator output to see what we've generated, and as well as a render section. It follows a step. We first need to generate, and every time we make a change in our app, we need to regenerate for that to pick up in renders. So first things first is we make sure we have MetaMask, we are on the Polygon network, and then we go and get an access pass. So here I explain that there will be a 1-hour access pass. This is due to prevent abuse of the system. So there's 1 hour for you to generate the data. You can render as long as you want to, but the generation part gives you that 1 hour to make tweaks as well. So here I'm going to say confirm, and there will be a pop-up. And so here I just click on continue. And then we get processing. Once this goes through and I see it did, I can now go ahead and generate. So I'm going to click on this button and it's going to say make sure that I've saved. So we know that we have saved and I'm going to say sign. This will go ahead and generate the data and bring it back to us. Now at this point, you might get an error message saying that you do not have enough layers, and in that case you need to increase your layers or decrease the generations that you are doing. It will guide you and tell you that if it's possible or not. However, as we can see, we've got our first group with all the layers with the x-rays, and then we have our generations where there's only 3 layers. We can also go at this point and filter by ID if we want to search for an ID, or we can search for any traits with Santa. We can also go to this analysis tab and see what our collection did. We can see that we have 2 unused options, and that's basically because we only generated 15 items and we had more than enough options for those to not be used. So if we increase our generation, these would be used as well. But we get a good view of which options were used and which options were not. So this is a good point to, on a high level, do some analysis on your collection and be confident in what's there and what is not. So now we know that we have a collection and we're ready to maybe go and render this. So we can see we have got generations, and in order for us to render this, we need to give access to a folder. Now, before we do that, we need to make sure that our configs are correct for our metadata. So there's a few things that we can set. On the generation tab, we get to say that we want to allow duplicates, meaning that there could be possible duplicates of your NFTs or not. I just keep it switched off, but there might be cases where you want that. Then you can also mix the groups. As you see, we've got groups with x-rays or apes with x-rays and not. And I'm going to turn this on. Now, once I do this, I need to regenerate. Otherwise, it's not going to pick up in the renders. So I'm going to regenerate. and just sign because I still have that hour, right? And you can see that in the generation, it actually now mixed the 3-layer basic artworks with the X-rays. All right. Next, we go to export, and this is where you get to configure your metadata. For the metadata, it can get quite complex, but it's fairly straightforward. You can use this kind of syntax, which is curly brackets and ID in the middle, which would replace that syntax with the current ID of that trait as it's being rendered. For example, if I wanted to call each one of my NFTs names, maybe hashtag SABC space curly brackets, ID in the middle of these curly brackets, and ID should be lowercase. Then if I generate, it's going to say SABC1, SABC2, 3, 4, and so forth. The same goes for your description. You can say, this is an ape, right? Or I can say, this is ape space curly brackets, ID. So it would be, this is ape1 with a background of, and now I can do curly brackets and background exactly how it's spelled in my traits over here. So now this would say, this is ape1 with background blue or yellow or whatever that background was. This gives you a dynamicness to it. For the external URL, you can do the same. I can say this is test.com / and then curly brackets ID, and this will say test.com / 1. So that if you had an external ID, it could actually point, or URL, it could point to that ID. For the prefix, as we all know, this is what you will change after you have uploaded your collection to IPFS or Arweave. So I'm not going to change this right now, but here you do not have that replacing factor. What you need to do is choose IPFS, whatever that URL is, right? And then we do /. We leave it just with a /. It would replace itself, okay? And next we look at what do we want to render. Now I can choose to not render the media, but I do want that. And I also want Ethereum metadata and Solana metadata. Maybe I just want one or both or none. However, if I do have this, for Solana, I do need to enter some creator address and a seller's fee. I also have the option to add custom metadata. Now this I explained in a previous video, which you can go and watch, but this essentially would also replace and override values. And this is made for people who really want custom metadata or add values or whatever that might be. However, I'm happy with my setup, and now I'm going to go ahead and render. At this point, I know I've said constantly save your files, but this is really the point where it's the most important, because here we will need to regenerate this all once we have actually saved the files to IPFS. So now go ahead and save. So we make sure we have the latest file. And then just for certainty, if you still have enough time, go and regenerate, right? So I would rather do all your configs and then generate. I just want to show you can do it either way. Now that everything is there, I can go and provide access to a folder. So make sure you do not select your same folder, but I want to select this renders folder. Give it access, say yes, it can edit, and now I can go on render. It will also say that you need to have made sure that you've saved your changes. I'm going to say confirm, sit back, relax, and wait for the collection to finish rendering. So now, as you can see, it's just going to go down and do a render. Now, sometimes you will see it's complete and it has 100% and it's red. So that is just something I need to iron out, but it has rendered successfully. If I click on render again, it's going to show 100% and it's going to be green. I just need to go and sort that out. I picked that up early this morning and I just do not have enough time to fix that now. But that being said, if it does stop midway through or you do get an error, you do need to fix some stuff, which I'll show in just a second. However, if we now open renders, we can see that our images are here in its full glory, and it's awesome. And also we can go ahead into the metadata, and we should see here's all of our metadata. Now, as you can see, we've got everything here, and we've got our IPFS is there as well, all the links, and everything is adapting and changing as it would. And we also have Solana for those who like Solana. And yeah, this is basically it. So the last thing that I just want to show is that upload step. So because we've saved the file, if we refresh, at some point you're going to take your images and upload all of these to IPFS, right? So once you have done that, we actually need to repoint to that IPFS link. So you can either do that while you're still busy in the Art Engine, but let's say you accidentally closed it down and you need to regenerate that data. So remember that our first image was this one with the banana and the green body and the blue background. So if we go and upload that latest one, which is this one 4 now, we can see we have everything here. Remember, we can go in here and try and generate. So at this point, your timer might have ran out, but there might be still some time left depending on what the case might be. So we can generate, but we see that there's some files missing. And again, then all we need to do is go to the media library and make sure we upload and resync our data file. All right. When you go back here, you can see that this is what would be rendered. Now at this point, we can then go to the export and replace, right? Replace this with whatever IPFS or link we had for our metadata. And now once we go access our folder, we can go to renders. Once we have that, we already know that we have the media, so we can technically switch that off and just focus on the metadata to be updated. Or you can just keep it on as well. It's all up to you. But essentially, this step would regenerate your collection exactly how it was. And that's very important because we want that consistency throughout. So that now when we open our metadata, we can see that this has been replaced and we have it pointing to the correct file. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's tutorial. I really hope that you enjoyed this walkthrough with me. Now, like I said before, I really want you to just be cognizant of the fact that this is not a product. This is merely me building a tool for you to use, for you to try out. If you find some bugs, if you find some user things that you do not like, please let me know in this video because that would be critical and useful feedback for me to improve the app, to get it to a stage where it is ready for production, where it is great and has all the bells and whistles. Let me know what you enjoyed about the tool. I really love seeing these positive comments, and I really do appreciate each and every one of you for supporting me throughout my journey. And this allows me truly to put tools like these out there and also enjoy making YouTube videos about coding. I hope, or my hope, is that once this is into a productionalized state, that I can move back into doing tutorials and maybe potentially on how to even build this out from scratch. You can learn from my journey as well. So I hope you have an amazing day. Let me know what you get up to with using this tool. And I would really appreciate it if you tweet, tag me in the tweets, show me what you create. And yeah, here it is.